Warning: the views and opinions expressed in this program are our own and/or those of our guests. They do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of our employers. Viewers' discretion is advised.
If I've got to add the seller's kids' braces back to hit a minimum DSCR, it's not a deal for me. And quite frankly, it's not one for you either.
Yeah, if you need the add backs to really make a deal work, then odds are you probably don't have a great deal.
What is your approach to critically evaluating projections and the underlying assumptions in the deal?
Hated it. Don't do it. Gonna be honest.
Promise I'm not being petty. I'm the one they envy, Brody, moving state to state. Make $1 million out the semi, plus I grinded from the start. I was stacking pennies, I might dip like Machiavelli. After the confetti, who ready? We ready? Who ready? We ready? Who ready? Who? We ready? Who? Who ready? Who? We ready? Who? Who ready? We ready? Who ready? We ready? Who ready? Who? We ready? Who? Who ready? Who? We ready? Who?
First, before we start, R.I.P. Rich Homie Quan.
Hey,
Yeah.
amen.
Mourn you
Rich
till I
homie.
join you. R.I.P.
You know, make you
is
feel
this
like 100
person?
bands on the walkthrough.
You
Who
know?
is this?
He was gonna perform.
Rich
Rich
Homie
Homie
Quan.
Quan is a rapper from Atlanta. He passed away today, 34 years old.
Natural
Oh,
causes,
man.
they're
He was
saying.
He's gonna
They're
perform
saying
at our
it was
wedding,
natural
Emily.
causes.
I had him booked for 2026.
Now we just got to get Bad Bunny, I guess.
Is
That's
Schoolboy
the-
Q still alive?
He is.
Yeah.
I like when he wears the Chicos Redondos or Round Boys. You know, he's got the little glasses.
He's getting really into golf, actually. He's really matured.
We all do. When you party too hard in Pennsylvania, you come back and you come crawling back to the country club, and that's it. So
Emily, keep us in line.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the BDO Show, a podcast for passionate BDOs wanting to level up their game with advice and stories from battle-tested BDOs. I'm your co-host, Emily Detour, and I am here with my fellow co-hosts, Alan Peterson, Chris Hackney, and Sterling Birdsong. Before we start each episode, I'm always going to remind you guys to send over your topics and suggestions to the BDO Show at artofsba.com. And do not forget to check out our whole family of shows, including SBA Today, which airs live every week on LinkedIn, as well as our flagship program, the Art of SBA Lending Podcast.
new format on the Art of SBA podcast too. I'm loving
Yeah.
it. Little town
Yep.
hall, open monologue.
Oh,
Really,
yeah.
this season's been awesome.
That was episode 2, by the way, if you saw the small balance episode.
That's the only one I watched. I just watched it over and over and over again.
BDOs. Have you ever had a borrower bring in like a brother-in-law to do their life insurance?
Doesn't end well, does it? We've all been there. When you require life insurance on your SBA loan, it's critical that you bring in a company that specializes in getting these policies in place for the SBA loans. The last thing you want is for life insurance to be the holdup. We all know that's a rookie mistake. SBA Protection Quick Close Life Insurance is the fastest, easiest way to secure the insurance protection that your borrower needs for their SBA loan. Their process is simple, hassle-free, and only takes a few minutes of your borrower's time. No lengthy paperwork, no complicated forms. They even have programs that don't require labs or doctor records for approval. And best of all, you will have the collateral assignment back in less than 24 hours. It's a no-brainer. Go to sbaprotection.com for more information or email Adam Bergen at adam@sbaprotection.com. So our friend Ted actually sent in a very nice long email that created an entire episode. So we're going to go ahead and completely, bend this around the art of structuring deals to protect both the bank and the borrower. And he kicked us off with a lot of questions and a lot of things that we should bring up. So I don't know if you guys want me to get right into those questions or if you guys maybe want to start with what you think about the topic and then we can roll into them.
No, this is
Whatever's
Ted.
best.
This is Ted's talk. I think he just hit us with the questions.
All right. So his first question was how involved, I'll hand this right to Alan because he's just dying to talk today. I can just tell he's over there. Like he drank a Red Bull. How involved should a BDO be in the upfront evaluation of opportunity? Should they rely solely on credit or take a more hands-on approach?
I do not ever just pump something to credit. I think we all have a responsibility to review a deal up front for the viability from a cash flows perspective, liquidity, all of the key things that we need to be looking at, the big hard items, I'm always looking at those up front. Credit doesn't get involved until I've made a decision that I'm going to issue a term sheet, that I want to sponsor the credit, that the deal fundamentally makes sense, that it's SBA eligible, that the structure is in line with what we like to see as a bank. At that point, we'll issue the term sheet. When that comes back with a good faith deposit, then we'll start really engaging the other folks, the analysts, the credit underwriters, et cetera. But as far as upfront, man, I'm just reviewing deals all day. Today was a record for me. 6 overpriced HVAC deals in the Southeast United States. BizAcs are going great, boys. Let me tell you, that was a great idea to niche down. What about you guys? What are you guys doing up front?
Yeah, your base salary, I always say, is that's what you get paid to bring deals in. But your commission comes from how you structure a deal and the analysis of the deal. I think I see too many BDOs. I brought the deal in and I forwarded the email to the underwriter and I put this wrong term sheet or this inaccurate term sheet out. What more do you want me to do? Like, a lot more. Like, do you know the revenue cycle? Like, you see trends in revenue or profitability? Like, ask those questions up front so that way you're informed about the deal you are bringing into your shop. It's not just the underwriter's job. Here's a deal, figure it out, and I'll present at loan committee or I'll be there at the closing table. So it is imperative that you know how to structure a deal up front and that you're doing that.
I agree with that 100%. I mean, I structure all the deals that I work on. So that is part of my value add and my experience in having done this for quite a while now. I've been in BDO since 2016. So that's 8 years of looking at different loan transactions and structuring them. And, just yesterday, I, had a long conversation with a gentleman where I was telling him, hey, here's how you can structure this to where it will be eligible and probably palatable for a bank and their credit committee to get comfortable with. Because, the great Lewis Benner was the one who told me that, you have to essentially find a happy middle ground between, what the customer wants and what the bank wants. That's your job as a lender, is essentially making both sides comfortable in the transaction so that they can move forward. And a lot of that does come down to structuring. And structuring, doesn't just mean, hey, we're going to allocate, these proceeds towards this so you can get over the 51% total towards real estate and we can give you 25 years or something along those lines. It can mean a lot of different things. Sometimes it's just, talking to a guy about, equity injection, how to structure it. Or sometimes it's as simple as, hey, you need to get your credit up and come back to me in 6 months. It can mean a lot of different things, but it's about kind of understanding what your bank's appetite is and what they're looking for, so that you can make sure that the deal actually fits.
Second question, how do you create preliminary spreads to determine the viability of a transaction? How does this impact the approval process?
Yeah, you should be spreading your request to make sure they actually cash flow and assessing some trends in the business as well. I still do it myself. Austin caught me and took a picture of me doing my own spreads here on a loan. I said, yeah, you're never above doing spreads on a deal.
Never above.
I do think it's important when you're looking at your spreads too, that you're looking at, do these add backs really make sense? Now, you can get to a point where you're a seasoned lender, seasoned BDO, and you can kind of eyeball a transaction and say, okay, it's $500,000. That payment is whatever the dollar amount is. You're looking at their net income. You do EBITDA, and you can say, okay, this could service that debt. And so maybe you don't need to do a full 3-year spread and analysis on a smaller transaction that you can kind of eyeball and do the math in your head, right, or with your computer on a calculator, than doing some spreadsheet. But I do think on the larger opportunities, it's super important that you do spread that out to make sure it's a creditworthy deal.
It's interesting that there's only, that I'm aware of, and I've talked to BDOs at many different shops, and the guys and the gals I'm speaking to all agree. I think we're all using the same Excel calculator. Shout outs Data 2.0.
Invented by Chris Hackney.
That's why I set you up for that. But the other thing too, I wanted to follow on is, this is the first step of the almighty rule of knowing your deal, right? If I've got to add the seller's kids' braces back to hit a minimum DSCR, it's not a deal for me. And quite frankly, it's not one for you either. It's knowing about the deal. It's understanding like goofy add backs. Oh, well, you got to add back the health insurance. Oh, okay. Like, are you covered by your spouse's health insurance? Well, no, I'm not married. What are you going to do about health insurance? Well, I'm going to get it. Okay, so why are we going to add that back then? And it's just kind of things like that, or replacement salaries that are actually in line with their personal expenses as demonstrated by their credit report. We see that you've got X mortgage payment, this, that, you got a couple cars, you got a Suburban, you got a Porsche, you got a paid off Passat, whatever. And you got to make something happen. You can't say, oh, no, I'm only going to need 15 grand a year. And it's a dangerous game you start playing, but you got to know those things up front. Louis Benner told me when I was new that you got to understand how the business makes a buck. As simple as that is, it can be very complicated. But when you're going to explain the actual business operation, you got to know what they do, who their customers are, how they get paid. All that matters, Chris, and I think that's kind of what you were identifying earlier.
Right. Sterling, you're spreading, right? You're the king of spreads.
Sometimes I will.
That was an inside joke. No, he's not. Hell no. Hell no.
From time to time, I will do my own spread.
Sterling
has an open Excel.
On a standalone basis.
Sterling asked for the workbook, was it recently? Like, he's been here for, 5 years? He's like, hey, where's that spreadsheet we all use?
Who's we? You got a mouse in your pocket?
Well, here's the thing is that I had my own from a prior institution that I've been using, but it doesn't have affiliates, right? So if I'm going to start doing affiliate analysis or individual analysis or going down to a more granular level, then yeah, I'm going to need to use Data 2.0 to be able to do that. But yeah, I mean, here's the thing though. My loans, they close.
Hey,
so
production
I
don't
must
lie.
be able to spot a deal.
Production don't lie.
That's it. Practice.
All right, third question. He got a lot of questions out of
He
this
sounds like a credit
topic.
guy. Keep going.
He's great. How critically do you evaluate ad backs to determine if they are legitimate? What are the common pitfalls?
If you're doing those goofy ad backs like Alan said, or if you're trying to do, I had one where he was a pool contractor. He built a pool in his own backyard and ran that through the business. You want to get some invoices for that and make it make sense. Like, hey, where's the pool at? That type of stuff. Adding back health insurance and things that's something you're not going to be able to add back. I don't care what shop it is, because the new buyer is going to run those same ad backs for the business as well. Some common pitfalls I see, just specifically, blindly adding back officers' compensation, excuse me. This happened to me early on when I was a young boy doing it. You just think, okay, officers' compensation. Of course, the sellers are the officers of the company. There was one deal, it was like $1 million deal. I just went and added back officers' compensation, but I never scrolled to the page that shows who the officers of the company are. So it turns out that 3 of the officers were staying in the business. So I had added back $300,000 of income that was staying when the new buyer took over. So that deal just blew up. And then everyone was upset at me and the referral. So he had done the same thing, the referral source as well. And when I showed it to him and I walked him through, he literally hung up on me because he was so pissed that, we both missed it. But that's a common pitfall that I see, is just not really thinking about what the ad backs are and just doing the same thing on every single deal and not really thinking that this makes sense for this particular deal. Does this ad back make sense? Like, y'all know EBITDA, that makes sense. But outside of that, is this person staying in the business? Okay, you say the wife doesn't really work in the business. She just draws a W-2. Well, how do you prove that out? Go a step deeper to substantiate those ad backs.
Yeah, if you need the ad backs to really make a deal work, then odds are you probably don't have a great deal. And when I say make a deal work, I mean sometimes people will show you negative cash flow and then get it all the way back to positive cash flow, and then somehow cash flowing at a 1.3 debt service coverage, and it's all through ad backs. I tell people, look, we'll do a couple of ad backs, maybe 3, 4, 5 different ad backs. They have to be reasonable. They have to be something that we can substantiate. If it's all this fugazi stuff, we're going to sniff it out in underwriting. We've been doing this for a while. We're smart. We know what's a real ad back, what's not a real ad back. And I'm just wasting that person's time if I'm going to take it into credit, telling them I'm selling them the world, and then I'm going to be able to get this deal across the finish line for them when I know that it doesn't actually cash flow because, maybe the seller's trying to hide some money from Uncle Sam.
And do not ever use seller's discretionary earnings for your basis for cash flow. don't ever do it. That just shows you're lazy and you haven't put any thought, and you're looking at the broker's listing and you don't want to do your own work.
You work for brokers. You're
Yeah.
not working for a client at
Yeah.
that standpoint. I mean, we're protecting people. It seems like the conversations go in the direction of like business acquisitions when we're talking about ad backs
Right.
very often, right? And it's like, we're protecting you. This is another layer of due diligence going on. And, you know, I'll have people that'll say stuff like, oh, well, you know, there's a little more cash than what we're showing. And listen, I grew up in the bar business. I understand bank of the mattress. I'm not judging anybody. But at the end of the day, the tax return is the source of truth. And it's that simple.
And it'll expose a lot. So don't lie, because we will find
Yeah,
you.
if you're willing to pay taxes on it, most likely you actually made that money. That's the way I always say it.
Yep.
You know, and that's what we're going to underwrite to. And this is a government-based program, so the tax return is the gold standard.
And if you are trying to add something back, if you can't substantiate it with documentation beyond just adding it back, then that's not a true add back.
No, it's fine. Just
It's
add it
fine.
back.
You just add it.
You just write it off.
There was one guy, shout out
Just
to,
write it off.
we had a USDA lender many, many years ago that we had on our team for a period. Shout out to him. Hope he listens. And he was trying to do an SBA deal, and myself and Eric Kaczynski, shout out to Eric Kaczynski. I think he still listens.
Love Eric
too.
Kaczynski.
And the guy goes, well, we see there's like $450,000 of ad backs just on one line. We're like, well, what is this? And he's like, it's an ad back. And then Eric goes, well, no, what is the ad back? And it's an ad back. And he literally just added back the number to make the deal cash flow and just thought like magically it would just appear somewhere. So that's Eric and I's kind of inside thing. We'll say to each other something. What is it? It's an ad back. No, but what is that? It's an ad back. Like, what do I need to say?
That's awesome.
It's like that scene in that, what is that episode?
Ship's Creek. That's what I was
Shit.
making a joke
Yeah.
about. Is that you just write it off, and it's like, well,
Who writes
it off?
I don't know. The write-off people. That's like the best scene probably in the entire show. It's hilarious. He's buying like lamps and bedspreads. Fourth question. What is your approach to critically evaluating projections and the underlying assumptions in a deal?
Hated it. Don't do it. Gonna be honest. Are we not going to keep it real with the people today? Well, I'm not evaluating projections and assumptions in a deal. That's taking it too far. I'm going to make sure it's in line with like historical numbers. Now, if it's a startup,
8% growth, historic makes
yeah,
sense.
it's got to be reasonable, but I'm not spending my time, dissecting your projections. We have great credit analysts that deserve to earn their pay and analyze assumptions to projections to the T.
That they
Yeah, so
deserve
here's the thing is
to
that when you're
earn their
doing
pay. I love that.
well put. Very, very presidential of you.
Yes.
Yes. We're spoken like a real politician. No, but I mean, the thing is that when we're acquiring a business, right? When you're financing a business acquisition, you're acquiring the business based on what it's doing today or what it's done historically. And so the value is derived from the ongoing cash flow that we can see on paper has already happened. So what's going to happen in the future? Yeah, of course, if somebody handed you some projections and it showed that they were planning on losing money after buying a cash flowing business, you'd probably be alarmed by that, right? But in reality, the only thing that's ever right about projections is that they're wrong. So
Right.
Do the projections really matter that much? I mean, no, they should be reasonable. It should be able to show you that the person's thinking logically about how they're going to run this business, and they should
Right.
certainly make sense. But when we're buying a business, we're buying it based on what it's done historically.
So projections don't hold much weight to you guys.
They got to be on planet Earth. That's really it. I mean, to Chris's point, I'm not getting in the weeds on, you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm not going to pretend that's the biggest thing, because the historic is going to tell me the story, to Sterling's point. That's the facts. If I get projections from someone that's going to take top line revenue from $1 million to $2 million in 12 months when they have limited but transferable experience, I send it back and I do it again. I say, do it again. It's like when I'm sending a cold dish back at the meat market. Shout outs next week, birthday party, Brian Krogi, fly in. I just say, I go, what is this? Make it again.
I love the dramatic.
And I'm not
effect.
going to make it for you. And if you can't handle financial literacy, you have no idea what you're doing, why are you signing a personal guarantee?
Absolutely. And projections do matter sometimes depending on the use of proceeds. So if you're doing a startup franchise, for example, you can look at the borrower's projections and then you can look at the franchise disclosure document. A lot of times in item 19 in the FDD, they will list, okay, all of our franchisees, the highest grossing franchisee makes $1 million a year. The lowest performing franchisee makes $500,000. If your borrower is projecting to make $3 million and not a single franchisee who's ever started one of those has not surpassed $1 million, then something is off. You need to understand why they are projecting to outperform every franchise in the history of that business. Or if they're much less than the range in that item 19, you need to understand what's going on there.
Yeah, you see to see sometimes some ridiculous thing when it comes to projections. I remember one deal I was looking at, it was a restaurant deal. This is at my prior bank, but we started, breaking down essentially how it would have to work for him to be able to hit the numbers that he was projecting. I think he was saying he was going to do like $3 million out of like a 3,000 square foot space. So basically every single person would have to flood the restaurant from the moment you open your doors in the morning. They would have to order the most expensive things on the menu.
Drink 700 drinks.
You had to have like 500 drinks. They'd have to maintain that same level of stewardship throughout the entire day until you closed. And then you have to do that 365 days a year in order to be able to hit the number that he was estimating, right? So if it doesn't make sense, if it doesn't pass the smell test, obviously, as Alan said, you need to go back to the drawing board and do it the right way.
And then projections.
Well, and we just said it kind of sees if they're sane or not. Like, why would you think that you can do that?
And projections
It's
too.
a character problem at that point.
Right,
Yeah,
or they just don't understand
100%.
the business. And projections too for like a restaurant. Sometimes when I used to do startup restaurants, you're going to make $1 million. Your average ticket is $30. You have X amount of tabletops. You can back into those assumptions to see if what the borrower is saying makes sense. And if it doesn't, you're going to have 700 people come into your door every day for a year to make this amount of revenue. This doesn't make any sense. So as a lender or BDO, if you're doing a lot of startup loans, you should be doing that analysis on what's your average ticket cost, how many people are walking through the door, how many tabletops do you have, turn times, looking at that analysis and backing into the math. Does the revenue make sense? If you're doing acquisition work primarily, me personally, I don't think projections are that important for an acquisition of a cash flowing business historically. It's about having the right buyer and who's the right fit.
Yeah, I agree. You can't buy businesses based on potential, and you can't do debt refinances based on projections. Two nuggets to kind of keep an eye. Those are things I see all the time. I wouldn't say it if it wasn't true. I mean, people come to you and they say, hey, here's a projection-based debt refinance, which, is very difficult to get comfortable with, because why would you do more in the future? Explain that to me, and how's the debt refinance going to help you accomplish that? Doesn't necessarily make sense. And then also, hey, I want to buy this business because I think it has so much potential to it. Well, unfortunately, we can't value it based on potential, because we are not an investor. We are debt. Okay. So we don't get to appreciate that upside with you like a equity investor would. We only make our money one way, and that's if you pay this loan back, and you don't show the ability to repay this loan right now. And so we're not going to lend the money to you.
And that's that. Okay. Question 5. How do you assess the experience of the borrower relative to your bank's expectations, and what are the key indicators?
So for us, that's a really big thing. Our bank is bigger on direct industry experience, I think, than maybe some other lenders are out there. Every bank has their own things that they're super particular about, but I know that when I go to credit committee, one of the first things that they're going to point out is if the guy doesn't have direct industry experience. So that's usually my very first question on a call. If someone's looking to acquire something, I say, okay, well, what's attracting you to this business? What have you done historically? Do you have any skills that are applicable that would transfer to this business? Because if they really don't have any skills that are even relatable in any way or even transferable, then it's probably it's an uphill fight from the beginning. The conversation shifts to, okay, how are you going to make this work without you having any direct industry experience? Is the seller going to stay on board? Maybe you should be doing some type of a partial type of buyout situation, as opposed to trying to buy, the business immediately, the 100% of it. Is there going to be some key employees that are going to stick around? Maybe you want to give some equity to somebody like that, or get them into some type of an employment agreement, things of that nature. Transition risk is the big thing, because if you step into a business and you don't really know what you're doing, or an industry that you don't really understand, those first 6 months are super key, and making sure that you transition the business the right way, and that you're not scaring off vendors, scaring off employees, pissing people off, and eventually running a business into the ground, because it really can happen that quickly.
I always rely upon, if we're going with transferable experience, I want to know that you've managed budgets and you've managed people at a significant level. So, I'm not as tight as saying it needs to be direct industry. It should be industry adjacent, related, or there should be a good story there. Another strength at times is when people bring in a minority partner who's an industry expert. That's a really good way, from my view, to mitigate that risk. Or even having, a board of people. That's one thing I see a lot of. That's kind of cringy. When
Are
I
you
get
guys
an
comfortable
email.
with the board, Alan?
No, dude.
Okay.
It's like makes me uncomfortable. I'll get an email like, I got these 7 industry professionals that aren't going to guarantee the deal, give me any money, or even have a minority share in the ownership. But look at these summaries and headshots, bank. I'll take $2 million.
Right. And
it's
meanwhile,
like,
if they call those guys, they'd be like, wait, who is this? Who's my number?
listen, it gives you
I
as
don't
much
know you.
It gives you as much credibility as calling yourself a Forbes contributor on LinkedIn when it's a pay to play.
That's too soon.
It's just I met with them today. I might spend a G on it. So when I post, just don't look just like. But the board thing is hard for me, Sterling, too. Like, it's serious business. I keep up with my portfolio. Shout outs to my clawback. So I'm in touch post close with my folks at least quarterly. In the very beginning, it's monthly. I have a call after we're done taping here with a gentleman that just closed on a large deal. He said everything's going well, but he wants just to catch up. This is what I can share in the business acquisition space for your first purchase. It's a lot harder than people think. Right now, specifically in business acquisitions, there's a guru culture that's talking about buying a 2 million EBITDA business with 0 down with no experience. That's not true. It doesn't exist, right? And I think that people underestimate how serious an unconditional personal guarantee is on a federally backed loan program. Make sure that you're taking the right risk. And yeah, I get it. You might want to buy a business, but do not let, entrepreneurial optimism blind you from the realities of what you can do and what you simply cannot do.
No, I mean, what you're saying is spot on, and that's super prevalent right now. I love my search funder guys, obviously, shout out to Sam Rosati and all those guys, those are good
Great
friends
guys.
of mine. But yeah, it's something that you see, obviously, that's become more prevalent where, you have super young guys, 25, 26 years old. They're fresh out of college. They've been working in corporate America for a year and a half. And then they decide they want to go and acquire a business. And sometimes they don't have that direct industry experience and they have no balance sheet, and they're getting gassed up by people saying, hey, yeah, just go out and do this. It's super easy. Just go buy this and have the seller hold a note for 2 years and everything's going to work out. And, it's more difficult than that, guys. I mean, banks want to know that they're going to get paid back. Banking is a small margin business. If one loan goes bad, they got to write a whole lot more loans and have those loans pay off in full in order to make back that money that they lost. Okay. Banks cannot be wrong very often, or they will not be in a bank for very long. So, you're going to run into issues if you're somebody who doesn't have a personal balance sheet, if you're somebody who doesn't have direct industry experience. And to be honest, that's the way that it should be, because not only is the bank protecting itself, the bank is also protecting you as well.
Yeah, and it's easy because some of those search funder people, they're not taking the risk. I mean, the risk is on the bank, the risk is on the seller holding a note. They're not coming with a personal balance sheet. They've got their investor partner. So of course it's easy when I can just kind of get in there and figure out how to run the business. If it doesn't work out, well, hey,
got nothing to lose.
Nothing to lose. And I'd rather do a deal with a ton of experience and tighter cash flow than 1.5 times even cash flow, debt service coverage, and someone who has no clue, no experience in the business. Because, someone with experience, they can at least keep the business stable or hopefully grow it. Someone with a lack of experience or no experience, it could go down. The likelihood of them increasing the performance is small or minimal.
Yeah, it matters.
Question number 6. How can differences in evaluations between the BDO and credit slow down the approval process, and how can this be mitigated?
It can slow down the process. In banking, they have what they call dynamic tension. And what that means is that there is
Whoa.
tension.
No, but I said
between-
entrepreneurial optimism.
and I'm not talking. Hackney's thinking about what's between him and Emily. That's a different type of dynamic tension. We're
Oh,
talking about banking dynamic tension.
There we go. Turn it up. We're back, baby. We're so
Yeah.
back. We're so
And
back.
so what that means is that, you have two forces moving in different directions, right? You have the lender who wants to get to the finish line. He wants to close business. And then you have an underwriter who's really there to protect the bank. And so those two forces need to work together, or sometimes there's some friction there in order to get a deal across the finish line. And so, is there going to be some times where BDO is going to feel like a deal is viable, and sometimes credit is going to feel like a deal is risky? Yeah, absolutely. And that's what goes back to structuring deals. So your job as the lender is to try and find a structure that is going to be palatable for the bank. And also at the same time, realistic for your customer to be able to execute. Because that's the one thing, is that you can go to credit sometimes and they'll tell you, hey, here's what I want in order to get this deal funded. But if you as the BDO know you can't realistically go and sell that to your customer, or it's just impossible for your customer to meet whatever the requests are that underwriting is making, you do have to push back on credit and tell them, hey, guys, we have to be realistic here. Or is this just a deal that we just don't want? Because in reality, if you just say, yes, sir, to credit, and then you go back to your customer and he can't do it, well, you're going to lose the deal anyways. So it's up to you to then, talk to credit, say, hey, guys, maybe having him bring another 100,000 to the table isn't realistic, because he only has 150,000 total, and he's already putting 100,000 in. Where's this other money going to come from? It doesn't come from thin air. He doesn't have a rich uncle. There's nowhere this is just going to magically poof, voila, here's another $100,000.
Yeah.
So maybe we ask the seller for a larger note instead. Would that make us comfortable?
You talk about this, Sterling. That's how you win those 50-50 calls, right?
Exactly. That's how you win the 50-50 calls, because, again, it comes down to a meeting of the two halves. Is you have credit on one side, you have sales on one side, but ultimately, remember this, guys, the bank needs to make loans. The bank is here to make loans ultimately because that's what keeps the lights on. Okay, so if you feel like your bank does not want to make loans, that's a problem. Okay, both sides should really ultimately at the end of the day be rowing in the same direction.
All right, guys, last question. Can you share examples where upfront evaluations by the BDO helped streamline the approval process or set realistic expectations with borrowers?
It should be managing those expectations up front. If there's no deal there, you should let them know immediately and tell them why, right? And I'm not talking about an opportunity that there could be some other things that go into it, some mitigants, if you will. If there's a little hair on it that we need to get around, it's an SBA loan after all, right? However, if there's just not a deal there, the best thing you can do for the borrower is explain to them why and let them know as quickly as possible. In regard to how do you efficiently streamline the process with structuring, et cetera, is by understanding your credit appetite, by working collaboratively, with your back office. Hey, I know that we can get comfortable and we're going to structure it this way. Then you're managing the expectations. Putting together a complete write-up is a big deal too. I know it takes some time. I wish that every single one of my deals I was able to do it on, but due to volume, sometimes I'll be honest, I fall short. What I really like to do though is spell out the deal. Don't leave a whole lot of basic questions. Explain how they make a buck, So when the credit underwriter actually receives the file, they're not just pumping in tax returns. And now they're going to ask a million questions of things that I could have addressed in the summary when I submitted the deal initially. So I think just making sure that you communicate the moving parts the best you can helps your back office, and making sure you communicate a structure that'll actually work, or if there's really a deal there, as quickly and effectively as possible helps the borrower.
Is that it? Just Alan? We're good?
I mean,
You know what? Let him cook.
yeah, he cooked.
Let
on
him
that one.
cook. All right, guys. Great episode. Thank you for answering all those questions. Ted, thank you for structuring our entire episode. It's questions like this, it's emails like this that keeps everything interesting, keeps us going. It keeps the topics fresh, especially going into conference season. We have a lot of things coming up, a lot of travel planned. So keep us on our toes. Send in more messages to the BDO show at artofsba.com. And don't forget to check out our sister shows, SBA Today and the Art of SBA Lending podcast. And we will see you next time.
And more questions from Ted.
Yo,
Bring 'em
man,
on.
questions.
Bring those
Ted.
questions
Ted.
on.
Big Teddy.